Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome everyone who is tuning in. My name is Sarah. I am the social media and community manager at Moving to Canada, and I will be your host today for this webinar. And I'm joined by the star of the show, Arif Khimani, who is the president and COO of MobSquad. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, definitely. No, really happy to have you on. I'll give you a chance to properly introduce yourself here in just a minute, but first I just want to let our listeners know what they can expect to learn today, and what to do if you have any questions pop up throughout the webinar. So as you all may or may not know, there have been some pretty big changes in Canadian immigration this summer, and there is also a shortage of tech talent in Canada. So the combination of those two things has led to some really big opportunities for tech workers who are interested in moving to Canada. Arif is an expert on the subject. He's going to be walking us through what some of these changes are and how you can benefit from them. First, getting you to Canada, and then once you're here, how to build a successful career here. We'll also have some time to answer questions at the end of the webinar. So if you have one pop up, please feel free to drop it in the comments section of wherever you're joining us from. At the moment, we are streaming to YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So wherever you're joining us from, feel free to pop your questions into the comments. And my coworker, Hugo, from Moving to Canada, will be popping in, answering some of your questions as we go. He will also be dropping some links in the comments. So if you hear us reference a link, we'll remind you that you can find them in the comments. But yeah, know to look for them there. All right, I think that is enough of that. Let's get into the good stuff. So, Arif, why don't you tell the community a little bit about yourself and what you and MobSquad get up to?
Awesome. Happy to do so. So again, thanks for having us on this. It's exciting, and there are a lot of great announcements and things that we're excited to talk about with this group. Just briefly on myself, I'm the president and CEO of a company called MobSquad. We help technology professionals from all over the world come to Canada and work with amazing clients. So we hire those that are either already in Canada, that are in the US facing visa issues, or those who are abroad who want to come to Canada. We fully support an expedited work permit as well as a full path to permanent residency for them and their family. Add them to our payroll, they get on our benefits, they work out of our offices, and we pair them with some of our amazing clients across North America so they can work with exciting companies on amazing tech roles. So we'll get more into that later on in terms of some of the specifics, but just wanted to give you a brief outline there. I joined the company basically when it launched in 2018, and prior to that was with Amazon and Procter & Gamble in various different finance roles with both companies. I was born and raised in Vancouver, but I've lived in Toronto and Calgary as well, so almost across Canada, and I've visited quite a few, almost all of the provinces at this point. And importantly, my parents came to Canada from South Africa during the apartheid era, and so I have a lot of passion for helping those who want to come to Canada, whether because of situations that are difficult or just to better their chances of a better life for them and their family. It's an important topic for us at the company, and for myself, you'll see across our team, this story is pretty common. So it's something that we care deeply about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, welcome. We're really happy to have you here. You're clearly very qualified, and I think you're going to bring a lot of value to everyone listening. So thanks for being here.
Of course.
Yeah, so as everyone can see who's joining by these article titles, there is a lot of opportunity here for tech workers. Can you talk a little bit about the scope of that opportunity in Canada for tech workers?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I think a way to frame it is if you were to just look at the number of open roles, if you just search, for example, software engineer across North America, that number is typically over 250 to 300,000. At its peak, during kind of the height of tech in 2021 and 2020, that was about 600,000. But even now, where we're hearing a lot about layoffs and we're hearing a lot about a crunch within the industry, there's still over 250,000 roles posted. And a lot of that opportunity exists in the US, but a lot of that also exists in Canada. And Canada has actually done specific things to try and attract tech workers to the country. So there are immigration streams, which we'll get further into in a couple of slides, as well as just policy to make things really welcoming for newcomers to basically boost the tech industry in Canada. And if you were to look over the last year, the two fastest growing tech markets in North America, so this would include, Silicon Valley and Austin and other sites that you might hear of that are hot, were Vancouver and Toronto. So it's
Mm.
working in that there are a lot of tech workers that are coming to those cities. And it's one of these things that's a bit of a virtuous cycle because as you attract more tech workers, more tech companies are hiring, more tech companies get started, and it grows the overall market as you start to grow the number of people that are there. And so you can see from some of these headlines, even with these are recent headlines where it even factors in the layoffs, there are still tons of roles available and tons of need for technology workers in the country, and there's still a massive shortage, even in the environment we're in today.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned Vancouver and Toronto being some of the hotspots for tech workers. We also threw Calgary and Halifax on here as being some of the top destinations for tech workers in Canada. And MobSquad has locations in all of these places, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we have offices in all four of these cities. Our headquarters office is actually in Calgary. And
Mm.
part of the reason we did that is that it is a very, very fast growing tech market as well. They are, very actively trying to move out of being an exclusively energy market into a more diversified economy. And a big piece of that is tech. And that's reflected in some of the immigration programs that exist there. But also in some of the recent companies that have moved there. If you drive around Calgary now, you will see offices for Google Cloud and Emphasis and other companies that have established offices there, as well as announcements for companies like Amazon that are growing there as well. And so Calgary is actually where our headquarters is, but we do have operations in Vancouver, which is where I am today,
Mm.
Toronto, which is on the east side, and then Halifax, which is all the way on the east coast.
Mm.
And part of the reason why we're in these four cities is that the time zones align really well with the U.S. So if you're working with a U.S. client, it's very easy to kind of be on that same time zone and be pretty close to the people that you're working with. But also because there's, cost of living differences between these cities. So, often younger single folks like to be in Vancouver and Toronto just because the markets are a little bigger. But if you're coming with a family and you want to raise a family and you're on a single income, at least to start, as your spouse may take some time to find work, or if you want to be able to afford, a freestanding home for you and your family, that's partly why we're also in Calgary and Halifax because the cost of living differences across these markets can be pretty big. And so we try to pick, what makes sense for people and work with them on where it might make sense to live.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, one would expect that you would be in kind of the powerhouse cities, which you are, but then it's great that you're also giving people options to not live where the cost of living is very outlandish. So, yeah, that's awesome. So, aside from opportunities, obviously people need to enjoy being in Canada as a country. Work is just one piece of where you decide to live. So, in your experience, what are some of the top motivating factors in attracting workers and families to Canada?
Yeah, no, of course, and I am of course very biased in this answer, being born and raised Canadian. But
Hmm.
I do think that Canada offers a number of advantages, especially for those who are newcomers. Some of them are up here, like the safety and career opportunity are big, and we spoke a little bit about the career opportunity, especially in tech. But there are many sectors that are short of talent, including in healthcare, in construction, in quite a few other areas where hospitality and tourism as well, where if you're coming as a technology worker but your spouse has a different career, there's lots of opportunity for both of you to be able to find work. The third bullet here is extremely important, and I think differentiates a little bit from other markets in that there are clear pathways for almost anybody that comes here to become permanent residents and eventual citizens of the country in very reasonable times. So for those that may be more familiar with the U.S. system, there are no country caps on permanent residency in Canada. So if you are from India or from China or from countries where it may take upwards of 20 or even longer years in the US to actually achieve your permanent residency, that doesn't exist in Canada. It's an entirely merit-based, points-based system under express entry where, based on your age, your work experience, your language ability in English or French, and your education, you're assigned a total point total, and that influences your chance of getting permanent residency, as well as provincial streams that we'll talk about as well that can help with that. And so, being able to see that path to citizenship and permanent residency is obviously important because you can then create a life for you and your family, knowing that the stability of being able to stay is there and doesn't necessarily depend on your particular job, at least long term. Some of the other ones on here are obviously important for people who come, having available healthcare that's publicly funded, so you're not worried again about your healthcare being tied to your employment is super important. There are great schools here. I went to school at UBC, but there's really good ones across the country that are good for both elementary, high school, and eventually university for kids. And it's a very multicultural population. It's a very diverse set of people that live across the country, and I have found it's been very welcoming to newcomers,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously important as those that are coming in are looking for an environment where they will want to be and want to exist. And we've on our team we've got folks from all over the world, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, Ukraine, Nigeria, the U.S. itself, and so there's so many people that are from so many different places, and we find that most of them have settled in really really well into their communities across the country, which is again super important if you're new somewhere, especially if you're bringing your family.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with all those reasons. I'm originally from the US myself, and when I moved here, I expected it to be very similar, but I was pleasantly surprised by some of the differences. Overall, I mean, it's North America, so it's going to be relatively the same in a lot of aspects, but the publicly funded healthcare and just the safety and the multicultural population, you really notice that when you get here, and it's definitely a good spot to be. I also am biased because I do now live here, but yeah, no, it's great. And to all of you out there who are tuning in, we'd love to hear what your reasons are for wanting to move to Canada, whether you're still considering what makes you interested in it, or if you're fully committed, we want to hear your reasons. So drop them in the comments.
Yeah, just one more quick point on this. Just,
Yeah.
we are biased, obviously, but just some data on why Canada, especially around the multiculturalism and opportunity. If you were to look at current polling around Canadian sentiment towards immigration and newcomers, it's actually polling at its most positive in history.
Oh,
So
wow.
even despite the fact that in last year and in the next 3 years, Canada is intending to set records for the number of newcomers to the country, the sentiment towards newcomers and immigrants is at its most positive, which is great because
Mm-hmm.
people generally view people who come here as those who are going to add to society, not only economically, which is obviously very important. There are people who are coming with great jobs, paying taxes, contributing to the economy, but also multiculturally in terms of arts and culture and food and all the things that people bring. And so that sentiment is very very strong. And actually, if you were to look recently, there was a Gallup poll done in the U.S. where immigrant the sentiment towards immigration is polling at its most negative since in the last
Wow.
20 years. So,
Wow.
so there's a bit
Yeah.
of a contrast there where, just the view there is in polling is pretty drastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And aside from the polls, you can definitely feel the difference, or at least I can, where um, people love trying food from different cultures, and there's just an overall appreciation that's really cool to see and be a part of.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some of the big immigration changes that we talked about earlier. There have been a lot of new updates for tech workers specifically. Can you talk us through what those are and help the community understand how they might benefit from them?
Yeah, absolutely. So this whole page is talking about specifically new programs that were announced during the Collision Conference last month in Toronto. And we're very fortunate that we helped consult on some of these with IRCC and the Minister of Immigration, because they're broadly just trying to help the tech field in Canada grow and help bring more highly skilled tech talent to Canada, both now and in the future. And so they made a few announcements here. I won't go into all of them in great detail, but we'll just touch on each of them here a little bit. So the first one is that they created a brand new work permit stream for those that currently hold H-1B visas in the U.S., where they could basically apply for an open work permit along with their family members to come to Canada under expedited processing. And our read of this program, you could see that it's already reached capacity. They had set the cap at 10,000 people, and that was obviously very highly coveted.
It says a
I
lot.
believe the main target for this program, yeah, it's amazing. I think the main target for this program was those who may have been laid off in the U.S. under the and were under H-1B visas. Because if that happens in the U.S., you have a 60-day grace period in which you have to find a new role where someone will sponsor your H-1B so you can transfer that over. And if you aren't able to do that, you would have to leave the country. And so what this does is allow those who may have been laid off in H-1B roles recently, especially given some of the tech layoffs, to have an alternative to stay in North America, which is, obviously exciting and helps bring great labor to Canada within the tech world.
Mhm.
A few of the other things they did here is they announced preliminarily a new innovation stream to attract talent. This will actually come out in December, so the details are a little bit sparse right now, but effectively, they're going to be employer-specific work permits for up to 5 years for a designated list of companies that are contributing to Canada's innovation goals. So companies that are on this list will be able to hire people through this innovation stream on 5-year work permits, and there will be a subsection of those that are actually open work permits as well. Importantly, within this stream, this is a non-LMIA based stream, so it's an LMIA exempt stream. So for those that are familiar with Canada, for most roles, you do need to obtain an LMIA before you can hire somebody. But this stream will be designated for certain employers and certain people where you won't actually need to go through that process, which is obviously very helpful for folks. There's been some promotion of helping those who are digital nomads work in Canada temporarily. So those on visitor visas have more flexibility to actually do some work in Canada as digital nomads on a temporary basis, which is helpful just as those who are kind of moving around. This next one is super, super important and exciting for us, which is that the global talent stream has returned to 14-day processing times. So since March of 2020, which is obviously when the pandemic started, this has fluctuated anywhere from 2 to 6 months in terms of processing, at least from what we have seen. But to get that back down to 2 weeks is really, really exciting because the current H-1B stream at the top that was mentioned, while exciting, is capped at only the 10,000 workers, which is now full, but also doesn't work for those who are abroad because they wouldn't have an H-1B visa, and it wouldn't work for those who are on OPT visas who don't yet have an H-1B. So if you lost the H-1B lottery either abroad or in the U.S., you would still need other streams. And the global talent stream, which is the primary stream that we use to help with workers, is now back to regular processing times, which means that generally within a month you could have started your application process and be working in Canada, which is really, really cool.
Very cool.
The startup visa enhancements are great. This is an existing program in Canada, but they just added length to the work permits and expanded the number of people on a startup team that could come under that visa, which is really, really good. And then there were STEM-specific express entry draws, which we'll talk about on the next slide a little bit more, but the first draw for that has now taken place. So a lot of exciting enhancements. I would say the overall sentiment behind all of them is just trying to make things more flexible for both technology workers across the world and in the US to come to Canada, but also for companies in Canada to be able to hire technology workers.
Yeah, no, these are definitely some exciting changes. And in addition to all these new changes, there are already some programs in place that you alluded to. Can you tell us a little bit more about programs like the Global Talent Stream and any of the provincial programs that stood out in your experience?
Yeah, no, of course. And, we've highlighted a few on here. And the important thing is, some of the streams that were announced that were on the previous slide, some of them are full already and some will only have more detail in December. But what we really want to emphasize is there's a ton of existing streams that we have been using and others have been using for quite some time to actually help people come to Canada. So the first on this list is there's a section of permanent residency called Express Entry, which I referenced earlier, which is a points-based system. So they look at age, education, work experience, and language skill in English or French or both to select people for permanent residency in Canada. What they have done this year is they've actually added category-specific draws within Express Entry. So what they were doing before is they would just pull from the entire pool and say whoever has the highest scores this week, can apply. But what they're doing now is they've actually sectioned off certain categories where they're going to draw within those alone. And so some of those are healthcare and STEM. And the one we're highlighting here, obviously, because it impacts the most people that would be tuning in here, is the STEM-specific draws. So if your application is within certain NOC codes that are covered in STEM, and there's a whole list of them, I can't go over them all now because there's probably about 40 occupations that qualify under this, but broadly, software engineers, technology workers, mathematicians, actuaries, different things that would fall under there, and other types of engineers. They're going to be holding draws just for those folks, which in theory should have lower scores because it's only going to pull from the pool when you have that experience. And so they've done their first one in June, and they're going to be in early July, and they're going to be doing more of them throughout the year, which should help with that.
Yeah, and
The global talent stream.
oh, sorry, just real quick. If anyone follows us on social media, they've probably been noticing that we are posting a lot of express entry draws. The category-based express entry draws have just really gone crazy. They've been holding them really often, so it's definitely a good opportunity for people to get an invitation to apply, especially if you fall under the STEM category.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and I'd highly recommend following Movie to Canada because it used to be pretty consistent that there would just be an express entry draw every 2 weeks or so, but now with P&P draws, with category draws, with regular express entry draws, the timing and frequency are quite different. There's not really a pattern right now that's obvious, so it's easiest to just follow an account that's tracking it for you, and then you can see see what's going on, see what's interesting, which is great.
Yeah, it's funny whenever one happens, we always post into our Slack channel draw, and we're all scrambling to get it up there as quickly as possible. So yes, let us do the hard work of scrambling to get news to you.
Yeah, it's perfect. Global Talent Stream has been a program that's been around for a few years. It was made permanent a couple of years ago, which is excellent because it started kind of as a pilot. This is the primary stream that we use and many others use for tech workers to come into Canada. It offers an expedited LMIA that's approved within 2 weeks, as well as an expedited work permit, which is now typically approved within 2 weeks as well. If you're coming with your spouse, they get an open work permit, and if you're coming with your children, they get dependent study work permits. So they can study in Canada, and your spouse can work in Canada virtually anywhere. It originally was very specific to tech occupations. They've since expanded the list to include a few other engineering-based occupations, like electrical engineers and aerospace engineers. We helped consult on some of those additional occupations along with other employers in Canada. To basically try and see what else does Canada need, and they do revise this list every year. And the exciting thing with the last revision is they kept all of the occupations that were already there and just added a few additional ones to expand the relevance of the program. One note there is that you do have to be, like a designated employer to use this program, in the sense that you have to be vetted by the government, and that you've been in good standing for enough time, and that you've treated your workers well. And you have to commit to a series of things to help Canadians and permanent residents in order to be able to hire workers through this stream. And so it does come with commitments from an employer, but you'd be able to find eligible employers, including ourselves, that do use the stream quite frequently. And then the last bullet is just important because it's around permanent residency programs that exist within provinces and regions. And so, as I mentioned with Express Entry, it is a points-based system, and it can be harder for certain people to achieve the points that they need. And a couple examples of this is if you are older, so if you're over 40, age is a large factor in the number of points that you get, and so it can be really hard to get to your total points if you're an older applicant. But also, if you didn't finish university, right? There's a lot of people in tech who didn't get all the way through university because they found a job. You would lose points for your education, which again is another important factor. And so there are provincial systems which are specifically directed at technology workers to help them get higher point totals or have other ways of getting to permanent residency. And so for those who aren't familiar, if you get nominated by a province, you get effectively 600 points towards your application. And most draws right now are about 480 points. And so it effectively guarantees you a nomination to Express Entry. A few of those that exist are the Alberta Accelerated Tech Pathway and BC P&P Tech. We again helped consult on the Alberta Accelerated Tech Pathway. I find it is the most streamlined and the quickest provincial nomination system in the country. It was launched at our office a couple of years ago, and we've used it many times and have found it to be, a really, really good system, which is again why we're headquartered in Calgary, because there's just such, exciting pathways for people that are there. And in Atlantic Canada, there's the Atlantic Immigration Program, which is not an Express Entry-based program, but is a separate PR program that's run specifically for those who are settling in Atlantic Canada.
Mhm.
Again, you have to be a designated employer to use basically any of these, but we are one, and there are others that exist on that list as well. Um, but they are an additional pathway for those who may have tried. Often questions we get are those who have tried to get under express entry themselves but don't quite have the points to get there. If you're working for a designated employer, there's certainly options that are available.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of options. I see some questions coming through. Just a
Mhm.
reminder that we will get to your questions at the end, so stick around. Um, yeah, lots of good questions coming in, so thank you for posting those. So, outside of work, there are definitely a lot of things that go into finding success in Canada. What would you say are some of the most important things to stay happy inside and outside of the workplace?
Yeah, of course. And so there's a few on here. We talked a little bit about the first one, and the reason why I won't go into it again, but the reason why we find that that's so important is just that if you know that your immigration pathway is stable, it provides so much peace of mind for you and your family, and allows you to better focus on things that are important to you, which can be obviously your job, but also your family and things in your community that matter to you. We find with a lot of folks in markets where the immigration is tougher or the path to permanent residency is not so stable, there is so much both time and mental energy devoted to trying to get a green card or trying to figure out a way to become a citizen or trying to stay on some permit that allows you to remain in the country that it can actually impact your productivity and impact your mental well-being just because you don't have that stability. And so the fact that Canada has that we find to be very helpful to people. We find that they do better at their job because they know that their path to being able to stay here is stable, but they're also just more their mental health is stronger, and they're just generally happier because that's all kind of taken care of.
Hmm.
Um, Another important factor is obviously like bringing your family and having them be able to actually succeed in the country are two different things. So like having them there, we think is step one, which is super important. But the fact that under most pathways, a spouse receives an open work permit and children receive study permits can be a huge help. Obviously, the factor of being able to be a dual income family is super important and a big factor for a lot of people. But also just having purpose, right? Like being a spouse in a country where you want to work and can't work is very challenging. And puts pressure on both parties in the relationship because you feel like things are just challenging for your spouse and it affects you. So it's not one where spouses have to work, obviously, but the ability to be able to do so we find is very important. Obviously, there are competitive salaries and benefits, and something to kind of talk about here is Canadian salaries are not the same as American salaries for those who are in the U.S. or are working in the U.S. But there are substantial cost of living differences, right? So if you live
Hmm.
in San Francisco or New York, for example, you will likely earn more as an engineer than you would in Toronto or Vancouver, but the rent you would pay and the cost of living in those cities is commensurate with the with the pricing that
Yeah.
kind of goes with that. So
Mhm.
I would say, on a cost of living basis, on an apples to apples basis, you can be pretty competitive in Canada, especially if you're willing to consider broader markets like Calgary and Halifax that have, even more of that.
Mhm.
Um, for career growth and opportunities and stability, we talked about it a little bit off the top, but the tech markets have grown tremendously in Canada, so it does help provide both stability in existing jobs, but also other opportunities should you be looking to pursue that. Um, And then, the other two are just, we think, things that are important to consider when you're looking at who you work for in Canada. There are some employers who are better than others, and that exists in every country. So finding those that have really strong company cultures and really strong community amongst the workers, we find is really important because oftentimes, if you're coming to Canada, the most time you're going to spend is at your job, and your initial community of people is going to be the people you work with.
Mhm.
And so having people around you that are supportive, that are helpful, that give you an environment that you're excited to go to every day and give you exciting work to do, and we can be very important and can help with the final bullet here, which is just around growing your network in the country. And I define networking broader than just like those who can help you find jobs or those who are in your like work community, but this can actually be your broader community that right? So those that can help you find sports leagues that you're interested in, or community events that line up with things that you care about, or good schools for your families, and different things like that. And so, we think that this list generally are just important to those who are coming, and just important things for people to think about as they consider Canada.
Yeah, definitely. You did a very good job of putting all of that into words. There are some things that I didn't consider. Like it's a no-brainer that you want to have your family here when you move, but being able to get your family on open work permits is huge when it comes to eliminating frustration, and those sorts of things can definitely build up when someone wants to work and they're unable to, and you maybe wouldn't think of that. You're just like, okay, I can get my family in, and you don't think about what happens if they're unable to work. So yeah, that's definitely huge. And I echo what you said about being part of a supportive company culture and everything. That makes a huge difference when you're first moving to a place. This is my first job. Moving to Canada is my first job in Canada since moving here, and having a supportive culture around me has really made a huge difference in acclimating to a new country. So I think those are all great points. So, not only has Arif been really helpful in providing us with information about new and existing programs and how you can be successful here, but Arif and MobSquad are actually going to be able to help you outside of this webinar if you need a bit more support. So, can you talk through some of the scenarios where people may want to reach out to you and your team at MobSquad?
Yeah, of course. I gave a brief description of the company off the top, but there's three specific scenarios over these next three slides that are our most common, use cases. So if you are in any of these situations, this is the best way to get in touch. So one of the largest streams of folks that we help are actually folks that are in the U.S. That have an expiring U.S. work visa. So if the most common example here is if you studied in the U.S. and you got a STEM OPT visa, that allows you to work in the U.S. for 3 years. And what you're hoping to do over those 3 years is win the H-1B lottery in one of three attempts. So you'll generally attempt it all three times. But the odds of winning the H-1B lottery are low and have been decreasing. So in this last year, there were about 700,000 applicants for 85,000 spots. And that 85,000 spots have been steady for over a decade. And so the number of positions that are available hasn't changed, but the number of people applying has grown dramatically. And so your odds of getting selected, which used to be about 1 in 4, are now dropping to 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 in terms of the number of applicants per spot. So there are a lot of people in the U.S. that we find are in a situation where they're on a STEM OPT visa and they've lost their final attempt at the lottery, or they only have one more and they're starting to get anxious about what to do. But there's other scenarios around here that aren't on the page. Like if you're in the U.S. and you have a visa but your spouse can't work, or you're in the U.S. and you are on an H-1B visa but you're on a green card list that's upwards of 30 years because of the country that you're from, and the country cap is just going to take forever. If you're interested in relocating to Canada and continuing to support the same company that you're working with, there's a form that will be linked in the chat that you can go to that will allow you to get in touch with one of our team members. And often what we're able to do is we would hire you. You would join our company, you'd be on our payroll, you'd be on our benefits, you work out of our offices, you work with our teammates, but you're often able to then be contracted to the company that you were working with in the US previously on an exclusive and long-term basis. And so it kind of creates a win-win situation where you are then able to come to Canada. We would support, as I mentioned earlier, a fully expedited work permit, so you could generally be here within a month, as well as a fully supported path to permanent residency. And what I mean by that is we pay all the government and legal fees for both the work permit and PR process for you and your family. The company gets to keep working with you, you get to keep working with the company, and so that relationship that you've already formed, doesn't have to go to waste. And we get amazing people in Canada like yourself, if you're in the scenario, and fully support that path. So if you're in that situation, please use the link that has been posted. You can also go to mobsquad.io, and there's a Get Started button at the very top of the screen. So just click on that, and it'll direct you exactly to the same form. And then it says, where'd you find us? Just say moving to Canada if you saw us on this webinar.
Mm-hmm. And there are more scenarios, right?
Yeah, of course. So this is the second one, which is that if you're abroad, so if you're actually not in the US or Canada, we know that this audience tunes in from all over the world. If you're currently supporting a North American company from offshore, or you have a North American company that wants to work with you, a lot of the time they won't support the immigration pathway to actually get you here. Either because they're a US based company and you need to have won the H-1B lottery to be able to get there, or they just can't do it, or they don't have an operation in Canada, so they don't support the Canadian stream. Lucky for you, we do, right? So we can basically bring folks from, from India, from Ukraine, from Latin America, like Brazil and Costa Rica or anywhere else, and have them join us in Canada. And you would support a North American company much in the same way that I mentioned on the previous slide. But instead of coming from the US with an expiring visa, you would actually just be coming directly from a different country into Canada. And so the same expedited work stream that I mentioned exists for those that are in the US or abroad. So the path to get here would be largely similar. It's just from a different place. And the way to get in touch with us is the same as before. So just fill out the form, give us a little bit of detail on your situation, and one of our team members would get in touch typically within a day.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just check out that form in the comment section. Hugo's linked it down there. Make sure you say where you found the link, the Moving Canada webinar. And then there's one more scenario where you may want to get in touch with MobSquad.
Yeah, of course. And so the first two streams are the ones that we can typically help with the quickest and in the easiest way, just because in those cases, you've already got a company that wants to work with you as a MobSquad client. And so in those cases, we can generally move very, very quickly. But we do have a third option, which we get questions on a lot when we do things like this, which is that, I am looking for a new opportunity. Do you have roles for me where I can just apply? And the answer is yes. We have what we call a talent roster. And so there is an application link, which will be posted here. And there will basically be a series of roles that we have posted there. So you'll see roles for senior software engineer and data scientist and some of the more exciting fields within technology. You can just submit an application into that, and then we will fill you through our tech recruiting process. So you will go through a technical screen as well as a behavioral screen, and if you pass both of those, we will add you to our roster. And what we do with that roster is we have, tons of clients that we work with and tons of clients that we are hoping to work with that are looking for new talent. So if a client comes to us and says, I need to work with some great data scientists, or I need AI engineers or machine learning engineers, as soon as possible, we then filter from this roster who would be the best fit and put them in front of clients. And if clients are interested in working with them, we can then contact you and have you join our team to work with those clients and support them. I will say, with the tech slowdown now, this side has been slower. So this will take longer, at least on our end, because obviously it takes client interest in order to need these technical services for us to hire more people. But we still do recommend that if you are, super skilled and interested in this, just put in your application, and we would keep that on file in the database for as long as you want us to. So if you find something else and say, I don't need this anymore, that's totally fine. But we're happy to keep your profile live within the database for as long as you want to. And as soon as clients are interested, we'll get in touch with you right away.
Great, yeah, never hurts to have the option. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of opportunities through MobSquad that people can take advantage of. So we have reached the portion of the webinar where we are going to be going through some of your questions. Thank you so much to everyone who has written in. There have been a lot of questions coming through, and we're excited to go through some of them. So let's take a look. Addie is joining us from USA. Welcome, Addie. Will this live stream be recorded? Yes, we are recording right now. We will be posting a recorded version to YouTube in the coming weeks. So if you joined late and you missed the beginning, or if you just want to go through and listen to some of the information back again, you will be able to do that. Just keep an eye out on our social media channels, and we will let you know when that is posted. Got some links from Hugo. Thank you, Hugo. Addie, do Canadian employers offer relocation assistance if moving from the U.S.? So
yeah. So go ahead.
Go ahead. I think there's a bit of a delay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I would say a lot of Canadian employers do. It's not a kind of hard yes or hard no answer here. So some do and some don't. But I would say quite a few do offer relocation assistance for moving from the U.S. I can say for our company, one thing that we do offer to everybody is that we have a community experience team. So they will help you with everything that you would need in terms of like figuring out your flight details, temporary and permanent accommodation. We pick up every new employee at the airport when they arrive. And we provide any other kind of white glove service around like, getting your driver's license changed, getting onto healthcare, getting your social insurance number, and also just things that can be helpful for your family. So, finding good schools for your kids, helping your spouse find work, anything like that. In terms of assistance, it does depend, on the role and when and where you're joining. In most cases, we do provide relocation assistance, and I would say a lot of
Mm-hmm.
companies do, but it does depend on a case by case basis.
Mm-hmm. Just a note before we continue, we also had a bunch of questions come through on LinkedIn. If you are not seeing them here and getting worried that your question will not be answered, don't worry. Hugo has been sending us those questions. They don't connect to this section, but we will be getting to them, so just hang in there. Sean, would express entry be a better option for being automation engineering graduate over a working holiday visa?
Uh, I would generally say yes, and the main reason for that is express entry is a permanent residence option, which means that you would be able to stay in Canada long term. A working holiday visa or using a visitor visa through kind of some of the new digital nomad options does provide a time box on how long you can stay, which is typically 6 months. Whereas express entry would allow you to stay in the country effectively as long as you want.
Mm,
Permanent residency is granted for 5 years, and as long as you're in the country for 2 of those 5 years, you can then apply to renew that permanent residency. Um, Again. So and you can get on your path to citizenship, which can be achieved within 3.5 years or 4 years for most folks, if that's something of interest. So I would definitely say it's a better option. There's a little more work involved, obviously, with applying to PR versus like a visitor visa. But I would say, if you're competitive within the express entry pool, it's definitely worth considering.
yeah, you don't want to get to the end of your time and not want to leave, but be forced to. There's nothing worse than that. Okay, Spencer. Irish moved to Montreal last September with the IEC work permit, applying for PR through both Express Entry and the Quebec program. Do these tech pathways affect Quebec's program at all?
Yeah, so we are not operational in Quebec, so I'm not by no means an expert on Quebec. But from what I understand, the programs that exist in Quebec continue to exist in Quebec. So the new announcements, some of them are eligible nationwide, some of them are, not the same in Quebec. But if you'd applied under the programs that you mentioned here, they still exist for Quebec. And the way that specifically the express entry announcement would affect Quebec is the category specific draws should be nationwide. And so if you qualify under one of those, that would actually enhance Quebec's program.
Great. Foreign object. I have been holding out to apply for Express Entry until I get 12 months full time work, but I see STEM stream only needs 6 months. I've got 10 months right now. Any advice for my situation?
Yeah, so if you have an application already under express entry, um, it should update your point totals automatically based on your experience that you have. Um, if you're 10 months of experience already, so express entry doesn't necessarily require a certain amount of work experience, but you get additional points for having more work experience. If you have a year or 2 years or 3 years of foreign work experience, or a year, 2 years, 3 years of Canadian work experience, you get more points for having that, with more being on the Canadian side. In your case, I mean, if you're so close to getting the 12 months of full-time work, I would just keep working, and then by the time you hit 12 months, just double check that your express entry profile has reflected the points to update your point total to reflect that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, just update your application to make sure that it does. And then once you've hit that 12 months, you will get the enhanced points for doing that. And the reason I say that is the STEM draws are only happening occasionally, whereas you want to make yourself eligible for all of the draws, so foreign skilled worker as well as Canadian experience class if this experience is in Canada. And so I would recommend getting to the full 12 months so that you're eligible with your points for all of the draws that come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, we've got Alex. Looks like she may be from the UK. Are PNP streams the only option for immigration as an older applicant? I changed careers to the tech industry and now at 45 looking to move to Canada.
Not Yeah, so not necessarily. I would say the PNP streams are a great option because it's very hard to get to the higher point totals as somebody who is 45. Um, there are things you can do to enhance your score. Like if you take the language test and max out your language score, that can really help your application because there's kind of score multipliers like having work experience plus a high language score or education plus a high language score. There's other points you can do. So the more education you have as well, that can help. So having master's programs in addition to bachelor programs can help that as well. But it can certainly be a challenge as an older applicant to get high enough. And so um, the couple things I would consider are coming to Canada first as a temporary worker, because if you gain a year or 2 years of experience in Canada, there's a lot of points that get assessed for that. And then you're eligible for when they do Canadian experience class draws as well. So if you're able to come here first on a work permit and get some Canadian work experience, that can help. But I would strongly consider the PNP options. So, the options that we mentioned are the BC Tech program in BC, but also the Alberta Accelerated Tech program. But the Atlantic Immigration Program, which is actually not an express entry program, is one worth considering as well, because it allows you quite a few options outside of the tech industry to actually consider occupations as well. So they are all worth considering. Happy to kind of take it offline and go into much more detail on them. But it's not the only path, but tends to be the best path is some of the PNP options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to get more details from Arif, we'll have some information for you at the end on how to contact MobSquad. Okay, Addie, how much do MobSquad charge for helping folks from the U.S. move to Canada with jobs?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We do not charge applicants anything. So we fully support the permanent residency and work permit paths, paying all of the government legal fees ourselves without charging that back to the applicant. The way that we make money is we charge US clients. So a client will pay us for services of those that are in Canada, and you would just be on our payroll and on our benefits, as kind of a standard employee. To be transparent, there are sometimes salary adjustments from those who are coming from the US to Canada, depending on where you're coming from. Like, as I was saying earlier, if you're used to making a Silicon Valley, wage as an engineer, it's very unlikely that you're going to make the same amount in Canada. But what we do is we try to pay people in the top quartile at a minimum, and often in the top decile, based on their job and the location that they're moving to, so that from a cost of living standpoint, they are at least net neutral, if not better off in Canada. So your salary may be different when you come to Canada, but it should, match up with cost of living in the market that you're in. But we don't charge candidates for the work that we do. Our revenue comes from the clients that we work with.
Mm-hmm. I bet that was the answer Addie was hoping for. That's great. Sean, I think we already answered your question. Namitha, I am working in Canada and on a closed work permit. Can you help me with my express entry and PNP profiles?
I'm happy to chat. Like if you reach out through one of our links and just mention that you saw us through moving to Canada, we can definitely have a conversation on how that would work. I can't help directly because in full disclosure, I'm not an immigration consultant or any of that, so I can't provide advice on that front. But I can certainly help direct you to the right places and provide you what I can. So just feel free to reach out and we can certainly do that.
Mm-hmm. If you do end up needing an immigration consultant, feel free to check out the Moving to Canada website. We work with some immigration consultants as well. So yeah, there are definitely options for you if you need them. Addie, if a MobSquad applicant fails one of your video or code interviews, would that person have another chance to apply again after some preparation?
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally welcome to apply again. If you want to apply for the same job, I would just reach out to the team, talent at mobsquad.io or info at mobsquad.io, and just kind of explain the situation. And then we can kind of reset your profile so that you can do it again. Or if you apply to a different job within there that you feel like you're more applicable to, you can certainly do that as well. But you should be able to just reapply. But if you are facing challenges where it says you've already gone through the system, just flip us a note so we can reset your application. You can start it again if you want.
Mm-hmm. Great. Looks like there's the same question. Alex, is there more information about being a digital nomad in Canada?
Yeah, so basically what happened was it was fairly difficult to be a digital nomad in Canada previously. It has gotten easier with the announcements that they've made, where they are allowing those on visitor visas to work for up to 6 months in Canada as a digital nomad. So it is not a pathway to long-term work in Canada, and it doesn't help you necessarily with some of the PR streams because you're not necessarily gaining Canadian work experience with a Canadian company. But it does provide that flexibility where, if you're in Canada for a few months and want to work, that option should now be available to you. And if you literally just Google, Canada Tech Talent Strategy, it will pull up the IRCC website, and we can probably link it in here as well, just with some of those announcements that give you some detail on all of the programs that we touched on, including Digital Nomad, where you can see like what are the specific details I need to do. So, one thing you would need is a visitor visa to Canada, or if you're from a visa exempt country, an ETA. But it does give you more flexibility to do some work here on a short-term basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Hugo has dropped some links there, so be sure to check those out for a little bit more in-depth information. Stephen, amazing chat, folks. So informative. Thank you, Stephen. Do we feel the introduction of AI across the tech industry is going to expand on jobs in Canada or limit the tech jobs that will be available in the coming years?
Yeah, so I think the cop-out answer to this is probably a bit of both. But I do think, to give you a better answer, that the net will probably be more jobs in Canada. And the reason I say that is that Canada has some amazing machine learning and AI hotbeds, in across the country. There's some in Alberta, some in Toronto, and Quebec as well. And the evolution of AI has actually created some amazingly well-funded companies in Canada. Cohere is an example of one of those that have just gotten hundreds of millions of dollars in funding and have created new unicorns in the country. Those companies are going to need people to work for them. And so as these companies get founded in Canada, they're going to be growing their tech talent base. And it is true, I firmly believe that AI is going to replace certain tech jobs, but it's going to create, I think, more opportunity than it takes away. Because companies are going to have AI strategies where they don't already, and they'll need people to lead those. And there's going to be so many companies that get founded, out of this that end up, having either offices in Canada or who are founded directly in Canada that are going to build massive tech teams, right? So similar to the evolution of the tech industry, where the Googles and Metas and Amazons and all of those came online, created a huge boon of jobs while taking from others, but still were net positive. I think the same is going to be true with AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Great question, Stephen.
Yeah.
Namita, thank you. Happy we were able to answer your question. Samuel, how do you advise on international students in Canada enrolled in STEM graduate courses who wish to join your team?
Yeah, so I'll give broader advice because our team tends to be those with a little bit more experience. But having said that, you're always welcome to apply to the jobs on our site, regardless of your experience level. Because sometimes, if you have, just amazing education and background like that, that could certainly work. But what I would advise is if you're studying in Canada, you can get what's called a postgraduate work permit, which allows you to work in Canada on that work permit, and then you can gain Canadian work experience. And then once you have that Canadian work experience, you will be very, very competitive for an express entry draw, because you will have obviously education from the degree that you get, plus the Canadian work experience that you gained on your postgraduate work permit, which would basically set you up very, very well for for getting chosen for permanent residency. So that is one that I would do. For our team specifically, I would just go to our site, look at the jobs, find the one that you think you're the most relevant for, and send in an application. And hopefully it's competitive. We do get tons of applications from around the world, so it's a very competitive pool. But it never hurts to apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, throw your hat in the ring. Alex says, thank you so much for the info. Happy to answer your question, Alex. Okay, we only have a few more minutes left until the top of the hour, but we do have some questions on LinkedIn that we will get to. You won't be able to see them on the screen, but I will read them off here. Hugo, thank you for sending them to us. Khalid says, hello, which domains are included in tech workers?
Yeah, so too many to answer like right now, but some of the ones that are most common within global talent stream are software engineers, data scientists, cybersecurity specialists, information system specialists, IT consultants, web designers, and database analysts and data administrators. There are many, many more that kind of fall within those. Those are kind of the broader umbrella occupations. Um, we can drop a link to the global talent stream, which actually gives you all of the NOC codes that are applicable. And then within those NOC codes, you can see there are generally 50 example titles within each one that qualify. So it's quite a large group. If you are a tech worker, it's not 100%, but I would say 99% chance you would qualify for these domains.
Mm-hmm. We have a similar question from Robert: which occupations have been added to the global talent stream? So yeah, Robert, I would say check out that link as well. There are going to be a lot of different
Yeah,
job titles that fall under that, right?
I can give the specifics on what got added. So there were 4 that were basically added, which was civil engineers, electrical and electronics engineers, mining engineers, and aerospace engineers. So really
Okay,
what they did is they broadened it from just tech-based engineers to a lot of other types of engineers that could also now apply.
great. We've got another question from Khalid: is Newfoundland a good place to live? I have personally never been. Arif, have you?
I've never lived there, but spent a bunch of time in Halifax. I would say the Atlantic provinces are amazing. The people are super friendly, and I would say Newfoundland's a great place to live, but the caveat that I've not personally lived there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here we go. I'm just looking through some of these. I already okay, here we go. I already have an express entry profile and have started applying in Job Bank, but companies are not replying to my application. What can I do to improve my chances of possible employment? I'm not currently in Canada or the US. From Vincent.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a tougher market right now for sure. Like there's just less hiring in tech than there was a year ago, so it is more competitive. I would say the best things you can do: have a very, very, very strong resume. There are resources online that can help you with this because a lot of companies now use applicant tracking systems or ATSs, where the first screen is actually done through AI. And so there's ways that you can enhance your resume to mention all the things that those filters would look for. So, search for those tools to make your resume super competitive. Write a personalized cover letter to each position you apply for to show that you actually care about the job that you're applying for. Have a compelling LinkedIn profile with references and recommendations and skills, and a really well built out one. So if they go to your LinkedIn, it looks great. And keep on it. Like just apply to more positions than you think you will need to, just because it is 100% harder now than it was a year ago to get a job. So send in 100% more applications. It's just going to take time and effort, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, great. I hope that Arif's answers helped all of you. It looks like they did from the comments that are rolling in. I thought they were very helpful, so thank you for that. That is all the time we have for questions. Thank you for writing in, everyone. So, just to wrap this up, if you want to learn more about this subject matter and you want to learn more from Arif and MobSquad, you can visit MobSquad's website at mobsquad.io. And then you can also email the fabulous team at MobSquad at info@mobsquad.io. And if you do, please reference this webinar. And then you can also complete the form that Hugo has dropped in the comments. I don't think that the option to select that you saw us at this webinar is available right now, but just go ahead and complete the form anyway. There's a little link right there, but otherwise you can find it in the comment section. I think that wraps things up. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
No, I know we're at time. This was awesome. If there's questions you didn't get answered, please send us a note or reach out. We're happy to continue the conversation, and we hope to do another one soon.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Keep an eye out on our social media channels for the link to this full webinar. It'll be coming in the next couple weeks. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Arif.